Hello there everybody, Got Culture's Adam Cleary, and no doubt by now I hope you've seen episode 2 of season 8, A Night of the Seven Kingdoms. Now, it was a lovely little self-contained episode, a quasi-bottle episode, I have called it, and there wasn't really too many major plot points. There was nothing you would consider a spoiler, but there was one relatively major talking point concerning Arya and Gendry. Yes, the whole, and whether, yeah, there was that, obviously, but it does raise another much bigger question. No pun intended. And that bigger question is there more to Gendry than we had previously anticipated? You may remember he disappeared for the better part of 4 years, rowing his boat all over the place, but then they returned last season. He was in Beyond the Wall, he's going to be in the big Battle of Winterfell, but is there more to this than mere fan service? Is there actually a very important reason, other than Arya, that they've brought him back? Now, Game of Thrones is a show defined by its theories. R+L=J defined all the internet discourse around it for many, many years, until we found out that yes, indeed, R+L did equal J. But is there now, with not very long to go, another theory like this? Something which could have just as serious implications. Could, after all this time, R+C equal G? I mean, we know that he's the bastard son of Robert Baratheon, yes, but is he also the lost child of Cersei that has been previously alluded to? Does Gendry have as much of a claim to the Iron Throne as anybody else in the show? So we're first introduced to Gendry in this workshop where Ned Stark basically theorizes that he is Robert Baratheon's bastard child. He works out that the previous hand had also figured that out, and that could be one of the reasons he was killed. And he famously tells him, the boy ever wants to wield a sword rather than forge one, send him to me. And we find out that Gendry is one of many, we presume, bastard sons of Robert Baratheon. But more telling than that, perhaps, is the other line in season 1 where Cersei tells Catelyn Stark that she actually lost one of her children, who was, in her words, a black-haired beauty. Now, one of the main takeaways we get from that, obviously, is if it was black-haired, it was definitely Robert's child and not the, her brothers. That still absolutely grosses me out, but she never saw him. He died, apparently. Now, quite conveniently, the one thing that Gendry remembers about his mother is that she had yellow hair. Now, that could be a coincidence, yes, but Game of Thrones doesn't really deal in just throwing these kind of clues around for the sake of doing it. One thing to keep in mind here is that while the implication is very strongly that the child died at some point, it was miscarried, she does just use terms like it being lost, so there is some room for debate in all of that. Plus, you've got to remember that we're told that Robert used to send himself away when she was near the end of the pregnancy. He would not be around for any of that, so there is a window for her to conceivably have a healthy child and give it away. One thing that always crops up when discussing this theory is the prophecy given to Cersei by Maggie the Frog. As we all know, she was going to have 3 children, gold would be their crowns, gold would be their shrouds, and that does fit with Joffrey, Tommen, and Marcella. But as we've been led to believe in season 8, she is pregnant again, or at least she certainly thinks that she is. Now, if that's true, then that already gets rid of the prophecy. If she can be pregnant now, she could just as easily have been pregnant then. Alright, so assuming that that does break the prophecy, you've got to ask yourself what the narrative reasons for it happening are. Why on earth would they bring him back after all this time unless there was something very important for him to do? As I've already said, Game of Thrones does not deal in just throwaway moments. Everything tends to have a wider meaning, so it would have been very easy for them to leave him off the show. It would have been a loose end, yes, but not an overly important one. His arc had already been completed by the time he set sail, or so he thought. Now, yes, they could have just brought him back to do the old greased weasel tango with Arya. That's still going to traumatize me for the rest of my life. But you've got to also think, if he came back and he was the true-born son of King Robert Baratheon and Cersei Lannister, his claim to the Iron Throne is equally as strong as anybody else's. Now, yes, the Baratheons were technically usurpers, so I don't think Daenerys would agree with that so much, but still, it depends on how you want to interpret lineage. So you've got all of that. He breaks a big prophecy. He's got a credible claim on the throne. There are circumstances that could prove he was the son. Plus, you've got all those other little things like nobody actually knows who paid for him to be a blacksmith. Someone was clearly looking out for him when he was a child in King's Landing. So there is something there. Now, it could be very little. It could, again, just purely be for Arya, but it could also be that he's part of the final act, that he is this big thing, that R+C does equal G. And if that little bit of lore arithmetic does work out, then the parallels with Jon Snow are so immediately obvious. Gendry could so easily have had Jon's story had things worked out a little different. Jon was Ned's bastard, Gendry was Robert's. They both grew up not knowing who their mother was, even though it was somebody incredibly important. They both have this connection to Arya. Jon went to join the Night's Watch and Gendry was going to. It could all have been the opposite way around for both of them, as they even allude to in the cave in season 7. Now, those are all the arguments for this, and the more you say them out loud, the more convincing they become, but it's worth considering all the evidence to the contrary. And I mean, first of all, it's all kind of based on the fact that two of them mentioned hair colour some point 6 or 7 seasons ago, and that's not really that much to go on. Even though it is a teasing, tantalising little clue, it's not exactly firm evidence. Plus, Gendry's exact wording of this is that his mother had yellow hair and she died when he was young. Now, if you're old enough to remember her hair colour, you're probably old enough to remember her dying and old enough to realise that she's not actually the queen sitting in the Red Keep. Another thing that makes this quite appealing is the idea that Cersei is defined by her love for her children. It pretty much informs her entire narrative arc up until, well, I mean, it still does, to be perfectly honest with you. And the idea that she would then want to protect Gendry by sending him away rather than having him killed does seem like an appealing thing. But Cersei has stood by and watched countless Baratheon bastards be murdered at the hands of Joffrey, and if she knew Gendry was out there, this child that she cared for, his life would certainly have been at risk, and she did absolutely nothing about it. And then there is the elephant in the room of every single Game of Thrones conversation, and that is the books. This can simply not be true in the books, basically because of the way we've been presented with Robert and Cersei's relationship, and also with the wording about the loss of this child. The TV show goes to lengths to make the relationship between the king and his queen seem far more sympathetic. She even tells him at one point, "I did genuinely feel something for you, you know, not long after we lost our first child." But in the books, there is nothing there. There is no love between the pair of them. And when it comes to this specific thing, the book leaves you with no room whatsoever to debate it in your head. There is no margin for error. She says she had herself cleansed of that child. It is gone, it is dead, it was not loved and given away, it was nothing to her. And yes, you can make the argument that the TV show has now changed radically from the books, but we are in the last few episodes. They do have to line up eventually, and if Gendry is going to be this huge part of the final act in the show, and he can't be in the books, then that just doesn't work. The books have to be what directs this show. And yes, for all the TV show has left a little room for interpretation on all of this, the exact wording Cersei uses is that when they came to take his body, Robert then held her. Now yes, you can argue that there is some room for interpretation there still. She could be lying. For all we know, they could be two entirely separate events. But as we've said, the show doesn't just throw these lines of dialogue away if there's a bigger meaning behind them. If she said that, she either meant it or she needed Catelyn to think she did. And while the argument for Gendry does tend to imply that the prophecy isn't true, if Cersei has had him, she can have other children. We don't know for definite whether or not Gendry is Cersei's child. Thus, it works the other way as well. If he proves the prophecy doesn't work, by the same token, the prophecy proves he can't be Cersei's child. Depends which way you want to look at it. And finally, and perhaps more importantly, when it comes to the actual reality of this, we have, at the time of me recording this, 4 episodes left. Now we know for definite the next one is going to be the biggest battle in the show's history. You can probably bet there's going to be not a lot of major character points done in that episode, so the time remaining to reveal something as important and as seismic as this is, well, it's not very much, is it? It's the kind of thing you should maybe have dropped in before now. So what's the final verdict on this? When you weigh up both sides of the argument, what appears to be more likely? Well, there is evidence there for it. It is circumstantial, yes, but nonetheless, there is evidence there. The show likes to tease us with these sort of things, and the hair colour, while being flimsy at best, is definitely something it's designed to make you think. But then, on the other hand, if you want to make comparisons between this and R+L=J, the evidence for that was almost overwhelming. There were so many different examples of things you could pull together that made it seem like a compelling case, compared to, as I've just said, there being a question about some hair colour. But then again, you've got to balance all that out with the fact that they have rushed him back seemingly out of nowhere. For whatever reason, the showrunners appeared to be done with them, and then going into the final chapter, decided that they needed to have him around. And there's got to be something in that, something important, and this would fit that perfectly. So, I don't know, you want my opinion? It's Game of Thrones, and it's a theory about Game of Thrones. We simply won't know until we know, but still, it's interesting, isn't it? But far more important than all of this is what you make of it all. Is he Cersei's child? I mean, I certainly hope it is, otherwise making this video was 20 minutes of my life I am never getting back. Let us know in the comments below, and of course don't forget to like, share and subscribe. In the meantime though, thank you so much for watching, and thanks to James Hunt who's been standing behind the camera telling me when I've been getting these bits wrong. I've been Adam Cleary, and I'll see you soon.